Thank you, Bailey. Thank you, Bailey. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, good morning. Good morning, everybody. How is everybody this fine morning? Well, I want to thank all of you for coming again to our second Logicom Connect. It's great seeing everybody. It's great to have you guys here. I want to give a special thank you to all of our vendors, because without them, this doesn't happen. Speaking of vendors, in front of you, you're going to see a vendor passport book. We'd like you to speak to each one of our vendors. If you get them to initial off by their logo, put your name, your phone number in, turn it into the check-in desk, and enter to win a free iPad. So we want you to talk to our vendors. They're what makes this possible, so visit with them. Also want to give a special thank you to Kristen Hudson. Yeah, she knew that was coming. So Kristen joined us about a month ago, and when she joined us, we had the hotel booked, and that was about it. So she really did a tremendous job over the past month to put this together. Thank you very much, Kristen. So we have I think we have a great show in store for you. We hope that you're going to learn some good stuff, and there is an actual announcement that I'd like to make. So I founded this company in 2004, and the company has ebbed and flowed its way to make it to where we are today. And organizationally, things change, and you have to do things that's best for the company. And what I'm doing is what's best for the company. And I'm actually stepping down as CEO. So I'm not leaving the company. I'm just moving over and becoming the Chief People Officer, which is important, and it's important to our partners, because the people that service you, that'll be my responsibility, our workers. So what I'd like to do is introduce and bring up Logicom's new CEO, Noah Sutherland.
All right, so everybody have fun? We're done. Everybody can pack up. We're good to go. I can't thank y'all enough for coming. I can't thank Bobby enough for his kind words. I'm going to keep it as short and sweet as possible. There's a few things I'd like to say. So I took a slight sabbatical from work for a little while, and when I was able to come back to work, I had some opportunities and what I wanted to do and what I thought I wanted to do, and there was a few things that I knew. I knew I wanted to be involved in this industry again, and there's something else that kind of stuck in my mind. So I've known Bobby and Andres for 15 years now. Worked together in a lot of capacities. At one point in time, it was actually my wife's job to get Bobby fired, kind of. We go back a long way. So it wasn't fired, it was just, other support. So what always stuck out to me about Bobby and Andres, and no matter how we worked with them and what we did, is they always made it right. They weren't perfect. None of us are. But they always made it right. They always took a step back. If something was wrong, they made it right. They're the only people that I ever worked with, whenever I was working with them as a customer, that I felt like were a true partner. Okay? And I like to try to learn from the past a little bit, and I didn't want to associate with anybody that didn't kind of share the values, ethics, the beliefs that I did. And where's Andres at? Andres, there he is. Andres, Bobby, do that, okay? They absolutely do that, and I'm very honored to be able to work with them. We're going to do our best to work hard for y'all and give you the best support that we can. Most importantly, we had an event yesterday. We had some golfers out there taking some hacks, okay? And a few of them did okay, well enough to win a prize, okay? So I think, right? Yes. So closest to the pin is a seasoned golfer, been playing for quite a few years. I believe he's a scratch golfer, okay? Jason, come on down. You're the proud winner of an Apple Watch. The bag, you can keep the bag too. All right, we have one more, and I got to get my phone out so I don't mess up anybody's name. So you guys do not have to come up, but if you're in here, you can stand. With a 16 under score, these are definitely the people that apparently are not working enough, but playing golf a lot. Just kidding. Jeff Lynch, Jake West, Russell Brown, Jimmy Rigsby. All right, there we go. So you guys will actually be getting Amazon gift cards for your prizes. You'll get them emailed to you, so you don't even have to remember to pick up anything. So you'll be in good shape. Okay. So did we do social? Yeah. So the Logicom Connect conference. So LogicomUSA Connect is our hashtag. Please utilize the sessions. We have a lot of great sessions today. We're about to start off with a good one. The breakout sessions are in the rooms directly behind you. Okay, there's 2 going at a time. So feel free to get into the right session for you. If you absolutely have to, you can stay in here, but these are great sessions that a lot of people have spent a lot of time on. Some excellent stuff. To get us started, we're going to allow some of our vendors to come up here and introduce themselves. Okay, so we'll do this throughout the conference. We want to recognize all of our vendors because we couldn't do this without them. But we're going to first recognize some of our main sponsors that are here today. We got 3 of them that we're going to go through, then we'll get kicked off. First off, we want to go with Adtran. There he is. Come on up, Ryan.
Thanks a lot, Noah. I want to take the opportunity to welcome you as well. Thank you for coming. I appreciate all the work that the Logicom team has put into making this a good event. If you're not familiar with Adtran, we're a fiber end-to-end company, and that's really important now. And I've only got 84 slides, so don't worry about it. That's really important because in the U.S., and I'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, there are going to be more homes passed with fiber in the next 5 years than there are homes passed with fiber today. There's an amazing opportunity in doing things for your community that weren't possible before with all the funding, with all the technology that we have now, and Adtran is a big part of that. So we've combined recently with ADVA to create a broad product portfolio that supports fiber everywhere. So whether that's access, it's in transport, it's data center interconnect, anything that has to do with fiber, Adtran is there in the middle of that. We do open networks. We don't try to lock you into a walled garden. No matter how pretty that walled garden is, it's still a prison. So we try to lock you, not lock you, into open networks that allow you to pick the best of breed for a bunch of different solutions for a part of your network, but goes together in a way that makes it cohesive and makes it make sense. And a big part of that is driving networks with software. I talked to more than one operator last night who are running 3, 4, 5, 6,000 subscriber networks with 2 people, with 3 people. And the only way you can do that and keep your sanity is to have software doing a lot of the work for you, finding problems, fixing problems, highlighting things before they become issues, and helping you solve those issues very quickly. So that's a very important part of what we do. And security and monitorability are very important in networks today. We've got a lot of solutions that help you understand what's going on in your network and help you keep everything secure and locked down the way that it needs to be. And I'll stop there and give you the rest of my 84 slides tomorrow. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ryan. Oh, there's only 83 left. It won't be bad. Okay. We're going to do design next. We have a fill-in. Where's Sandy at? All right. Sandy's going to do a fantastic job filling in, I assure you.
Which button do I hit? I don't do Mac. Sorry. We're DZS. We've worked with quite a few of you in the past. I've changed shirts a few times, so that's kind of funny in the industry, isn't it? These are the electric co-ops that we have worked with. We're a global company, so we go Asia, Europe, and the US. So you've got the experience from all around the world of how everyone is implementing their infrastructures. So I know a lot of you do not know who we are. Stop by our booth, get a pair of socks. They're made in the US. And our manufacturing facility is in the US in Seminole, Florida. So just wanted to give you that quick information, we're a broadband access company. We're in the cloud, and come by and talk to us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sandy. And one more partner that we want to introduce before we get started here. And can I go for it? We'll do Walker and nope, Walker. Just Walker. Just Walker. Okay, Walker. James Jones. Everybody changes their name so much. It's so hard to keep up with them.
All right. Well, morning, everybody. Thank y'all for coming. I'm really proud to be here again. I got to be here last year with Walker, and we're proud to sponsor this show. It's the only one I get to go to is at the beach, so this is number one on my list. I don't know about y'all. Walker, you may have known us as Walker and Associates, but we're just Walker now. We are part of the family of USTC and Comstar Supply. Comstar was here last year, so now I'm technically representing them as well, I guess. Just a quick overview, we are a reseller. We represent about 700 different manufacturers that we stock. It's been a challenge since about March of 2020 to stock as much as we can, but we do what we can, and we love to work with you and work on just making sure we can get things to you as fast as possible and give you realistic dates on when we ship things to you. As I said, we do work with quite a few manufacturers. That's not even half of them there. The big ones everybody knows will be CommScope and Adtran and Juniper and things like that. Don't want to leave anybody out, but we've got a good list there. And the last thing I'll end on, I don't want to go too long, we have loose tube fiber. We have it in stock, ready to go. We can ship it right now. So come find me or come find Joe. We're here. We're happy to be here. So, thank y'all.
He acts like it's hard to come across the material these days. All right, so we have our first speaker coming up in just a moment. So I've been at Logicom since right after the beginning of July. Luckily, I was able to work with a lot of the people that are here already in the past in different endeavors. A lot of people I haven't got to work with yet, but I got to tell you, it's by far the best team that I've ever been able to work with. And one of the members of that team that reminds, especially Bobby and myself, how unintelligent we are very frequently, is Miss Terry, who we call Miss Terry Firestein. Miss Terry Firestein is a rock star in the world of compliance and has been for more years than I'm allowed to say verbally. She's fantastic. We learn from her every day. We feel like she's brought a wealth of knowledge to the Logicom group that we can help utilize with our partners, be able to do some tools. So she helps us with our compliance personally as a phone company and providing you services. Sometimes we have to do things to make sure we're in compliance that we all don't like, but keeps us out of trouble. Those things are important, but it's a changing world. Different funds, different monies available, different compliance regulations. So Ms. Terry's going to work on that, and she's going to give us a nice presentation on how this does. These are interactive at some point, so there will be questions involved. We want you to be as interactive as possible. So quick changeover of a laptop, and we'll get going with the next one.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words, Noah. I don't know about living up to them, but I'll do my best, that's for sure. Thank you all for coming to the beach. I don't know whose idea it was to put regulatory compliance at 9:30 in the morning, but we're going to make the best of it. We're going to we're going to make the best of it. I know a lot of you in the room. If I haven't met you personally by visiting your businesses, I hope to. I know I've talked to a lot of you on the phone and through email, but if you don't know me, I am Terry Firestein, and I was just talking at breakfast. I'll be talking about some things with a little history, because I always think history is very, very important. It informs where we came from and where we're going in a lot of instances. But we were talking about 1982, 83, 84, when there was divestiture, and that's when I entered the industry. So I will be celebrating my 40th anniversary in March of 2023. And I tell people all the time I've earned every single one of these gray hairs. So we'll keep on keeping on. But I'm very excited. I really thought after 40 years, and a lot of you have been doing this for a very long time, electric side, maybe not on the broadband and voice side, but certainly on the electric service side, you think you've seen it all. You think there's nothing left exciting to do. But gosh, here we are today talking about many wonderful things still yet to do, still yet to accomplish, challenges, as well as bringing our services and a better life, in a lot of cases, to our rural communities. We hear a lot about unserved and served. So some of what we're going to be talking about today is in regards to reform. USF reform is going to be one of my subjects this morning. If you read the overview on the agenda or the materials you were sent for the conference, it was kind of a 10,000-foot view. I'm actually going to speak to some things very much more specifically. And one of those things is USF reform. But before we talk about reform, is this just me not holding this right? I do want to mention one thing that's happening and will continue to happen to every single one of you in the room at some point in time. And USF reform is going to be what makes it happen either faster or slower. A lot of you are aware of your 499A and 499Q processes. Many of you in the room remain in what's called de minimis status, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But what I want you to be aware of, and it's a dialogue that if I'm doing your regulatory compliance for you, I need to have with you, I want to have with you, and I'll be reaching out to you to have it. If whoever your regulatory compliance consultant is, you need to be talking to them about the transition from de minimis to direct contributor status. So that's the slide I want to open up with this morning. If you are currently de minimis, and I'll back up a second, just for those of you that aren't familiar with USAC and the 499 USF contribution process. You all have an annual 499 that gets submitted on your behalf. It includes all your revenue. So if you're a voice provider, voice and broadband, triple play, voice, broadband, video, IPTV, whatever you're doing, all the revenues get reported to USAC, who is the administrator for the FCC for their high-cost programs. A lot of you are now involved in ACP, which is one of USAC's, one of the FCC's high-cost programs. So this is all impacting each other. So when we talk about reform, we're not just talking about changing a form or a formula. We're talking about widespread impacts to the funding that's coming to you now through CAF2, RDOF, BEAD, the state money, and as I don't want to use the word simply as the ACP program because it's a very complex program, but that's more you and the end user. So it's less you and the regulator, it's more you and the end user centric. So in that regard, it feels a little more simple because you know how to serve end users, you know how to provide excellent customer service, you know how to meet the needs of your communities and your members. So in that way, maybe a little more simple. But right now, the way your 499s are filed is all revenues are reported, all filers report. So when I say all filers, you have to have voice in that mix. So if you provide just voice, like I said, voice broadband video, you are filing. Now the question then becomes, what is used to calculate your contribution? And it's, at this point in time, interstate voice traffic. So there's two big components that Logicom helps you with. We do your traffic studies, okay? If you're using Logicom voice products, we're doing your traffic study. That's one big component of what goes into deciding whether you're de minimis or you're going to end up being a direct contributor. The other being something we're not really in control of. It's the USAC quarterly contribution factor. A lot of you have been talking about that factor because you recently transitioned from that de minimis status to a direct filer status. The revenues that are used, interstate voice revenues only, that is under reform. I think we all have enough knowledge in what we're doing and in the industry that we know the Universal Service Fund as it is today being underpinned by interstate voice revenues only is not sustainable. For all of the funding that's going out the door, this is what supports all that funding, what's coming in through the 499 Universal Service process. So we know that the lion's share, and we'll talk more about this in our RDOF session, performance measures. We'll talk a little bit about regulatory compliance on that side. But what we do know is the very small amount of revenue that's being generated by voice is not going to be able to sustain the Universal Service Fund go forward. They did, if you don't know, recently make the ACP program permanent. It was under temporary status. It's now been made permanent, which means now the FCC has to fund it. So that's also driving part of the USF reform. So if you're using Logicom as your regulatory compliance, I reach out to you every quarter. I'm watching your 499 process. So I'm gauging how close or how far are we from that $10,000 annual contribution. That's the threshold. So if we calculate your 499 contribution and it's less, $10,000 or less, that's what makes you de minimis, okay? Doesn't mean that we didn't calculate, we calculated zero, we just calculated a de minimis status, which means someone else is putting that money into the fund. Now, I don't want to say on your behalf, because if you're de minimis, you are actually, when you pay Logicom's bill, you are paying an expense to a vendor. You're not making a contribution to the fund. Right now, USAC does not have a protocol, a procedure for a de minimis service provider to send USAC money directly. Has to be through a third party. Typically, it's through your third party voice provider, whoever that may be. So that's a process that's historic. It's been in place forever. Now, the reason I even mention that is because when you do that transition, and there's folks in this room that can say, yes, this is exactly what happens, and you need to strategize and you need to plan for it. When you make that transition, it's not necessarily your de minimis status changed on June 30 and a direct contributor status started July 1. It's not as concrete, black and white as that. So I encourage you, when I reach out to you, we're going to be talking about forecast. Forecasting is hugely important. Whoever you're working with, you need to make sure that they're getting accurate quarterly forecasts of your growth. Certainly of your voice growth. Now, if you've already built your network and you're doing, okay, you know, you win a few, you lose a few, the forecast will level out and they can be more predictable. But if you're still building and maybe you're going into a greenfields area, maybe you're going to a service area that has been very limited in access to broadband and even decent phone service, that's when we really need to tighten down the forecast and talk real numbers. Because the forecasting that's done on each 499Q, 4 times a year, USAC uses those numbers. And it's the forecasted numbers that they're using to calculate what your monthly contribution would be when you become a direct contributor. So they're not necessarily looking at the annual true-up numbers. They're looking at the forecast numbers. So I'm emphasizing that just to make sure you understand that's really where we need to be very accurate and relevant and time sensitive. Okay, so think about your forecast, and are you leaving it up to someone else to decide what the forecast looks like? Okay, well, you know, I'll just 5% more, 3% more, 10% more. We want to get a little more accurate than that. Okay, so I have a note here. One of the things that I'm going to be doing for our clients that use us for regulatory compliance is historically, if you are de minimis, you are not required to actually file something. You can say, make a statement, a verification, I'm de minimis, I don't need to file. Well, because of what's coming with USF reform, I'm going to be filing actual 499Q forms. Now, the reason I mention it is because that impacts whoever's the officer, the certifying officer in the room. Take note, because normally you have one officer certification to do a year. That's the 499A. I'm going to start developing the 499Qs, so every quarter you will also get your officer notification to come and certify the 499Q. So that's a change to take note of, and we're going to start it with the November 1 499Q. So the accounting folks in the room are sending me third quarter revenue reports. They'll be used to file the November 1 499Q, and the officer will have to certify. Those of you that are no longer de minimis, you already know the routine. You have that officer certification to do quarterly. Okay? So the last thing I want to say about current 499 processes is, with reform, everyone will end up being a contributor. The question is when and exactly how. What will that formula look like? I've talked with a lot of folks here and over the past several weeks about, you know, internet, broadband. It's going to be in the mix. There's just no way they cannot build the contribution base, the FCC and USAC, they cannot build the contribution base needed to sustain the programs unless they bring more contributors into the mix. And who's most likely going to be brought into the mix? It's going to be ISPs. It's going to be internet service. So let's strategize. I've already reached out to 2 of you to kind of give you an idea of where you are on that $10,000 de minimis direct contributor fence. And at that point, that's when we want to sit down and strategize. How are we going to prepare for that first invoice, which will oftentimes be a big one? how do we prepare for that first invoice that's going to take you from de minimis to direct contributor? And if you have any questions or concerns about that, please talk to me. I'll be here all day Wednesday. We can sit down and talk about it. But it's very important. It's a big transition, and it's coming. Okay? And we want to make sure you're prepared. Something I get a lot of questions about, again, just want to briefly touch on the 499 process. It isn't just about universal service funding. How do we get money into the high-cost program, the E-rate schools and libraries, so on and so forth. Your 499A is also used, the revenues on that report are used by several administrators. So we've got Federal Telecommunications Relay Service, okay, and the current administrator is Logicom. You probably hear from them and log into their portal to pay your federal TRS invoice, at least annually, if not more often. NAMPA, currently the administrator is Welch, and they are responsible for research and development related to telephone numbers, NPA NXXs, NPA exhaust, opening up new MPAs, et cetera. You've got LNP, telephone number porting, iConnective, NPAC is the current administrator. And then those three use your actual 499A data to assess you. Everybody pays to support those three, the work of those three administrators. Whether you have a voice product or not, how you provide your voice, whether it's resale, you have a switch, doesn't matter how you do it, you're supporting the phone industry through those three administrators. It's a requirement. Federal regulatory, ITSP, lovely acronym, Interstate Telephone Service Provider. If you're doing video or cable, you also have a cable regulatory compliance fee. These are annual fees, and the assessment of these fees go to support the Federal Communications Commission and all of the wonderful work they do on the industry's behalf. So if you're in accounting or you have this responsibility and you're not familiar with these fees, we need to talk, because you might have an invoice sitting out there that you're not aware of. Okay? All right, let's visit about USF reform. I can't really go too deep into this. I can't tell you anything, give you any details about when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen. At the moment, what has happened is the FCC had a notice of proposed rulemaking. They had that allowed them to open up a cycle of comments and reply comments. That's all over now, and they did come out with an order. It was very interesting. If you read through it, you'll see everybody's opinions, because that's really what it was all about. And the bottom line was, what they ordered was, yes, we know we need to reform USF. That was the result of the order. Didn't say how, didn't say when, but they've now concluded it's no choice. We have to do it. There's a little history here. If you're not familiar at all and you're interested in it, the slides are there if you'd like a copy of the slides. On this slide, what I'd like to point out, when I talked earlier about the contribution factor, take a look at these numbers. So we're talking about first quarter 2017, that quarterly contribution factor was at 16.7%. We just had a 33% contribution factor. Now that's a direct result. That shows you how big the fund is growing and the pot that USF has to cover to go from 16% factor to 33% factor. Fourth quarter just came out, and that's a little over 28%, so it did come down a little bit. But we won't be seeing, 14, 15, 16, 17% again, in my mind, unless they drastically change the formula when they bring in new contributors. And you can see in that last paragraph The increases are in large part due to a decline in the contribution revenue base. Right now, again, if you remember, it's interstate voice revenue that's driving all this. Interstate, not even just all voice, it's just interstate, because that's what the FCC regulates. So that's what's changing. You can see in billions of dollars the difference between 2011 and 2020. So what we do know as far as universal service reform and the recent order, they still are staying close to the original goals of universal service, which is to expand services that are going to provide a quality of life for all citizens in the nation. I would encourage you, if you have a little bit of time, maybe to read through that order, because they did conclude some of the things. What they declined to include in USF reform was just as interesting as what they decided they were going to include. They declined to adopt sustainability or adaptability as a separate goal. NTCA had some interesting, some of the large industry groups, of course, put in pages and pages and pages of comment. They've all got long histories in the industry, and certainly in directing the FCC and USAC. What I found to be very interesting is they declined to adopt competition as a separate goal to reform. Had a lot of folks up in arms. So here's just a couple of things. I've highlighted what they wish to include in reform. So again, U.S. Telecom supporting a broad re-examination and expansion of the contribution base. Just about all of the big industry leaders, they've come to the conclusion there has to be an expansion of the contribution base. That's about the only thing they can agree on. Now, who that includes is the question. So several commenters specifically support expanding the contribution base to include revenues from broadband internet access service. And I think that's going to end up being a no-brainer. So let's strategize and plan for that. Interestingly enough, there were folks advocating, some economists, advocating that this simply become, instead of a contribution funding program, that Congress just fund USF through congressional appropriations. We'll have a laugh about that later. So a couple things that the industry wants to include, and this just speaks to who the potential contributors might be. I thought it was very interesting. Of course, everyone's kind of accepting and getting on board with internet broadband providers, but they're looking at edge providers. And there's been a lot of economic studies about these edge providers and the amount of traffic and revenue that's associated with what they provide. And if you're not familiar with the term edge provider, there's a little bit of a definition there. We're talking about streaming video providers, digital advertising firms, cloud services companies, those that are relying on end users and consumers. One thing that was repeated over and over again in the comments was affirming technological neutrality. And I think we all understand that. I think everybody supports that. And it was good to see that that was drawn out in the comments. Now, of course, all of this discussion about reform, we just are coming off the broadband data collection filing, the BDC. We're still waiting on postmortem for that. They've opened up the challenge process for those that use the location fabric. Haven't yet opened up challenge process for those that filed shape files and mapping files. But unfortunately, unfortunately is probably not the right word, but sometimes it feels unfortunate that some of this reform is going to mean more granular reporting. So one of the things that we'll need to work very closely on, and with folks like Andy and Brandon, we'll touch on it a little bit with RDOF session later, performance measures, that's going to be expanded. You can just expect it's going to come. The FCC is going to want more and more and more data, and it's going to be on a more and more granular level. Our challenge then becomes, where do we get it? Do we have a vendor there? It resides there in a vendor space. Do we have it within our own OSS, BSS? Do we have it in our mapping systems? That's going to be our challenge, is finding that data. This is just a little bit about that challenge process. If you're interested, you can read about it. Location fabric challenges have begun. Mapping is to come. Net neutrality is being visited yet again. Many of you have experience with the previous rounds of negotiations and notices of proposed rulemaking and comments around net neutrality. We seem to come down on two sides of the fence. You're either for it or against it. There doesn't really seem to be a middle ground. If you want to talk about it, I'm available to talk about it. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time, because again, it's not at all settled. If you don't already know all of these things, USF reform, net neutrality, they're political hot button issues. And where it all ends up coming down, who knows, because it is impacted by who's in the White House, what the agenda is, who's the commissioner of the FCC, what the FCC's agenda is, and it can change overnight with a change in the White House. And that's really what's making it difficult to use our crystal balls in regulatory compliance and make some type of judgment call that will allow us to move on and start making preparations, real preparations. So there's a couple slides here reminding you of what net neutrality is all about and why it's such an issue. It really, part of the contention is definitions of who's going to regulate ISPs, and that's dependent on definitions. Are we information services? Is it going to be considered a utility and redefined as a utility? All of that comes into play. This is just kind of a throwaway slide that I thought was interesting. One more thing I want to talk to you about is something we actually got some action on back in June and July. The American Data and Privacy Protection Act. Has anybody heard of it? We have a new acronym, ADPPA, the American Data and Privacy Protection Act. So you're going to hear from me about this over the next couple of months. It is a legal action. What was interesting is in July 2022, it did move out of the House of Representatives, and it's still awaiting full House and Senate approval. Negotiations are ongoing. But I will be putting together a summary of how that will impact us and the services you're providing, who it will regulate. There's very specific lists of who the covered, quote-unquote, covered entities will be and the covered services. But it basically defines covered data as any information or device that identifies or can be reasonably linked to a person. It also protects biometric data, genetic data, and geolocation information. It could be far-reaching. or it could be something we already understand and know through things like our CP&I policies, our cybersecurity policies, our robocall mitigation policies. Those types of things might end up being enough for us as service providers, but this particular act might bring a lot more activity in the monitoring and reporting side of the house. So you'll be hearing more from me on that. Federal electronic surveillance law comes into play, if you're familiar with that. And there's a lot of history that informs all of that. Surveillance law, including in the FCC's Enforcement Bureau and Homeland Security are involved in this process. So we're waiting to see just how big the changes will be. Now, the last thing I want to say to you, and I appreciate your attention, a lot of conversations I have with folks, regulatory compliance is like the last thing they think about. And I was talking earlier with some folks and yesterday with some folks. I want to encourage you, please, as you're planning, whether you're planning to build a network, or you're planning to launch a new service, or you're planning to change a policy or procedure in customer service or in billing, you're hiring a new OSS, BSS vendor, you're going to put an RFP out for a vendor of any type, I encourage you to please think about regulatory compliance on the front end, not on the back end. Regulatory compliance, knowing what you'll be faced with, will help inform your decision making. I'll give you a really, really simple, quick example. We have a new reporting requirement. It's called RND. Simple thing, you report disconnected phone numbers. It's an outgrowth of robocall mitigation. So every month, by the 15th of every month, we're reporting disconnected phone numbers. Now, if you're using Logicom voice product, we're doing that for you. If you're using other voice vendors, not so much. They'll either provide the data to you, you have to go pull it and file it, or you have to find the data in your OSS, BSS. So there's a variety of ways it can be done. Your third-party voice vendor is not required to do it for you, even though they're the ones providing you the phone numbers, okay? And they obviously would know what's been disconnected. So knowing that in who I choose, it will matter whether or not I'm going to be involved in yet another monthly filing might be helpful to you. So that's just a really simple, quick example of how putting regulatory compliance earlier in the decision-making process would be helpful to you. So there'll be no surprises when little new reporting requirements pop up. And they will continue to pop up because the FCC, in order to inform themselves to work on all of this reform, whether it's USF or something else, they're going to be looking for data in all sizes, shapes, forms, places. And we want to be able to accommodate that. So that's my last word to you. Think about regulatory compliance first. Yay. Thank you all. I appreciate your attention.
These things get further away from me when you get older, I noticed. You ever see someone when they turn these around to look at the agenda and they go to someone else's and they look at it because you can't get them far enough away from you when they're on your face? So, real quick, we got a couple other things that we're working on and doing that I just want to remind you in case I forget to do it later. So we have some breakout sessions. We're going to try to, we didn't list breaks, but we have them built in so that you kind of know they're coming. So we have a breakout session starting at 10:30. Okay, the breakout sessions are in the rooms behind you. They're listed on here. There'll be Logicom employees that are doing those sessions. So Logicom Enterprise Solutions, which is also being live streamed simultaneously with some of the people that couldn't make the event. Okay, and we're also doing a sales specific event. Okay, so Rebecca Witt will be doing the sales one, and we'll have a group of people doing the Logicom Enterprise Solutions. Okay, so if you need some help or interested, thinking about improving sales for business customers, things like that, feel free to attend that session. If you want to look at the new enterprise solutions that we're offering or how that we're going to make changes to that, please do that session. After those sessions, immediately following those breakout sessions, we will have lunch. Lunch will be out here, you can eat in here, okay? We really want you to eat in here, not necessarily have to, but towards the end of it, make sure you're here because we have a presentation as you're finishing lunch. That's really important to us, and we're really excited about that. So just make sure you're in there for that. We got a video to play, and we got some awards to hand out. So that's what we have next. So 10:30, the following rooms behind you for those breakout sessions. We're going to let those people go so they can prepare for those. So please interact with our vendors. It gives you a chance to take your passports. If you don't have a passport in front of you, there's a few extra up here in the front. Okay, I know everybody sits in the back by default. You guys got here early, so you got your back tables. Okay, there's a few up here, so get those signed. That way you can get entered into that opportunity to win an iPad. Okay. All right, thanks everyone.